If you outsource the raising of your children, you're already making yourself a single mother, just so you know. Here's what's going on. There's a lot of LARPing that goes on the right with the supposed traditional movement, which she's absolutely right, isn't living the traditional lifestyle. However, it's still a counterintuitive message to put out there that, oh, you're going to be trapped by your husband and his income.
People didn't even figure out what fulfillment is, and so we don't actually even know what the heck it is we're even arguing about.
I'm sorry, I hate to call out my own party, but the young girls on the right promoting this like trad wife bullshit. I just want to make sourdough for my husband. That's great. I'm all for it. I promote traditional values. I understand. I have been working since I was very young. I don't really plan on stopping working. I suggest you find a hobby that makes you money. But you guys, guess what? Guess what, baby girl? That lifestyle working out, a man, a provider, you just get to sit at home, bake bread every day, slim to none. I would say none that's going to work out for you or quite literally anyone you know. You're actually setting yourself up for failure because it could not be easier, if that's what you're going to pursue, to be trapped by a man. Okay? Also, let's bring some other things to the table besides sourdough. Guys want to be mentally stimulated as well as physical, okay?
True.
But I'm just like, please, you guys are too young to be promoting this. And also, by the way, it's cringe. You guys are cringe, okay?
It is.
Now, Emily, are you standing proudly by that TikTok?
Thank you guys for laughing. That is supposed to be the point of a lot of my videos. I don't take things too seriously. I usually say things like this and don't think anything of it. I do want to point out in the video, I did start it by being like, look, I love stay-at-home moms. I support them. I promote conservative values. I think the issue with the video is a lot of people just took the video and then gave their own meaning. The group I was specifically bashing on was the young girls in their 20s that promote like traditional lifestyles online that we all know in the right-wing community absolutely do not live these lifestyles. And it's just a bit over the top. It's kind of more cosplay than anything. So of course I support moms that do that. I just don't support the girls pretending to do it, I guess, if that kind of makes sense.
It does make sense. And the trad wife thing is absolute nonsense. Those trad wife TikToks, they're not real. I can say that definitively because I live right next to stay-at-home moms, okay? I live in a house with like 11 different people. Different people have their own apartments. Yeah, being a stay-at-home mom, from what I can tell, living right next to a couple of them, is incredibly difficult and ruthless. And you get like 2 hours of sleep and you're dead exhausted and you have a million different things to do and taking care of your kids. And I see these women and they're just like they got this, glaze over their eyes where it's just like, it's so much all the time. And so yeah, I, for one, am definitely against the whole, stereotyping, gleamy, very... It's all hyped up for social media, but it's not nuanced, it's not accurate, and it's not a very useful depiction of what it's actually like to be a stay-at-home mom. It's really freaking hard. And I say that as someone who was raised by a stay-at-home mom. And let me tell you, we made that stuff hard for her, but she did it anyways. And I'm very, very grateful for that, and I always support traditional values. But these TikToks, not real. Not real at all.
I'm not sure it does. Andrew, does it make sense to you?
Well, I mean, she's right in a sense that there's a lot of LARPing that goes on the right with the supposed traditional movement, which she's absolutely right, isn't living the traditional lifestyle. However, it's still a counterintuitive message to put out there that, oh, you're going to be trapped by your husband and his income. It's like, good. Don't you want to be in a relationship with your husband and have access to his income? Like, what's the problem here? That would be the values you're trying to move towards, right? So like, ultimately, it's a contradicting message. I understand why you got a bunch of garbage for it. It is a good idea, I think, to point out the LARP, a good idea to point out how much faux traditionalism is on the right because it's a way for them to peddle sex, and that's exactly what they're doing. You see them in skimpy outfits doing exactly that. Yeah. Totally fair. But on the other hand, you absolutely should not be putting out a message which ridicules women for wanting to be stay-at-home moms and actually live some type of lifestyle which is conducive to their children and family. That's silly.
Let's play at this stage the clip.
Yeah, I mean, also trapped is just the wrong word to use, but overall my message I stand by.
Okay, I want to play.
Fair enough. And, I understand that a person could hear the word trapped and think of like a an abusive relationship where the man, doesn't let her have her own money, her own cards, keeps control of her IDA, and just dictates everything about her life. That's not cool. And of course, there are terrible men who take advantage of traditional systems to do that, just like there are terrible people who take advantage of modern systems to do that. And so, yeah, I understand. The trap is not.
I think it fits in well here. The Caroline Levitt clip. This is where she's working with her baby. We'll just show the picture of her working at the White House with a baby in one hand and helping to run the country with the other. Now, when I first saw that picture, I thought, wow, that's a pretty extraordinary, powerful image of a young woman who's very young to be doing the incredibly important job she does. She does it, I think, extraordinarily well. And she's a mother, and she's feeding her son whilst doing this at the same time. Rachel, when you saw that image, it got a lot of blowback, good and bad. Some people loved it, some people hated it. What did you think about it?
Well, I actually tweeted about this too, because although I'm a big fan of Caroline, as a person, I think she's great, she's smart, she's lovely. I don't understand this compulsion, especially in the Trump administration, but on the right in general, where we're supposed to be conservatives, where we are pushing mothers to work. Trump has been a huge proponent of hiring women, getting women back to work as soon as possible after having the baby. And I think this is a huge mistake because, number one, what are we conserving? If we're not conserving the traditional family and traditional gender roles and motherhood in the middle of a birth rate crisis, what are we conserving as conservatives? Just like lower taxes? I mean, should be a core issue for us on the right to say, no, motherhood is not a part-time gig that you do on the side. You don't, ship your baby off to daycare where they're spending 3 times as much time with a low-wage daycare worker as they are with mom while you go and do your career. There's plenty of life to live after raising kids. I think after you've done that, if you want to venture out and do a few more things, once you have the empty nest, I think that's okay. But pushing mothers to work it's one of the key things that's tearing apart the fabric of society because we're not raising our own children. We're not passing down our values to them. We're sending them to daycare and we're sending them to state-run schools, and that's who they're being raised by.
All right, Clementine, your response to that?
Do you work, Rachel?
No.
You don't make any money from your podcasting?
I make some money, but I do. I do maybe you do some form of paid employment. Yes. First of all, my children are grown up now. I'm 44 years old, so I had my first one at 20. They're grown up. They're moved out. Yeah. But I work still very, very part-time, maybe a couple hours a week at most.
But do you have
because my primary responsibility is to my husband.
But do you?
Yeah. And I think people are speaking like on too many like different extremes. You can raise a kid just fine in daycare. Like, you just got to be good at what you're doing. Like, there's no one correct way to live life. As soon as you start getting into all the weeds and stuff, like, you're going to come up with so many real life scenarios that just forbid you from doing things the optimal way, right? Like, if your husband has an injury and the government paid unemployment rates are not enough because you've overinflated your lifestyle, then maybe the wife has to go and work and you got to put the kids to daycare or you put them in state-run schools until husband can get back up to work and do stuff. Like, it's fine to talk about this stuff in the abstract, as in like, yes, state-run schools are a problem. If you can afford private school, that's great. Maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should limit the amount of time kids have in daycare, but that's kind of subjective to what your needs as a family are. Like, if you need 2 incomes, then you put the kids in daycare and you hope it works out fine and you just do your best to parent them when they're at home. And I think most people turn out to be fine with that. I'm sure there's some statistic that says it doesn't, but what are you going to do, right? Like, you just got to live life the best you can. It's nice to talk about this stuff in the abstract, but I find that a lot of the ideological do's and don'ts, they don't actually 100% hold up in real day-to-day life when you're trying to, like, get through, like, just getting through your life is a lot more there's a lot more to it than just picking out statistics and being like, oh, we have to do this and we have to do that because statistics say this and that. Like, that's fine. But do what you want to do, but don't be surprised when other people's lives don't work out the same way yours did. And so they can't exactly apply your preferred ideology in the way that you would because their life just isn't the same as yours. Does that make sense? Let me know in the comments if that makes sense.
Yeah, you've got 5 children, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? And they're all grown up and all moved out, or you've still got some young
We
children?
still have a
youngest
couple.
one- The youngest
Yeah, we
ones
still have
are
a couple
teenagers.
at home. And by the way, you're just making an
Okay.
argument from
So
hypocrisy.
can I just
Point
ask
out the
you?
hypocrisy.
Can I just ask you? Do you find, even with the small amount of part-time work that you do, which you do get paid for, do you find satisfaction from that? Do you get satisfaction from that work?
It's not the money because Andrew makes far more than I make. I make a very, very tiny amount of money off of, you know, my book and a couple of appearances here and there, might sell a few books. It's practically nothing. If I was doing it for the money, it'd be a waste of even the couple of hours. But what I would say to that is, we're not against women doing other things. So if you look at the Bible and the Proverbs 31 woman, she does
That's
a
what
lot
I
of
said.
things. She's out buying land, she's making decisions, she's doing all kinds of things. The difference is that she's doing them under the purview of the guidance and leadership of her husband and for her family, not for a corporation, not for her own glory, not for her own ambition.
A lot of
That's
that depends
what
on
I'm trying
whether
to
or not
do.
you have faith in the Bible, which obviously not everyone does. But the reason I asked you those questions wasn't because I was trying to set you up or anything like that. It doesn't surprise me that you would get some satisfaction. To me, the point of the question wasn't about the money. It's about the work. It's about the passion that you put into it. And the reason I asked was because a multi-year study done by Adrienne Freck and Sarah Damaske, found that the mental health of women who worked full-time after the birth of their first child was significantly higher than those who didn't have paid work at all. So I think that taking into account the fact that for a lot of women, and this is also what Betty Friedan found when she wrote The Feminine Mystique, and Stephanie Coontz backed this up as well in her book, The Way We Never Were, which is a history of the
But are
modern
you
American
married,
family.
Clementine? I've no idea about your situation, but are you married? Do you have kids? What's your deal?
I've got a kid. I'm not married.
Okay, but you have a...
I'm a single mother.
Okay.
And I have a very excellent relationship with my son's father. We co-parent together very well, but we're not married. We don't live together. I certainly have found, since having a child, I mean, I've always worked anyway, but I've been working since I was 13 years old, but I've always found that work for me is very satisfying. And what I'm saying is that these are the findings of multiple historians, anthropologists, scientists, that
these are the findings of diehard feminists who are only investigating this from a feminist point of view. They're already sold on the ideology, and what they do is they cherry pick data.
Okay, but I could say the same thing about you, right? Like, I could say the same thing. Oh, these are the findings of diehard conservatives, and they're only investigating things from a biblical point of view so that they can manipulate the statistics to say whatever they think the Bible wants them to say, right? Like, that's not an argument. Like, that's not an argument at all. It goes both ways. You can make, it's an ad hominem fallacy. You're basically just attacking the person's character and trying to say that, oh, because they have a different ideology than me, they must be completely biased, and so they're just going to manipulate the statistics. Why don't we actually just go look at the statistics?
She's a world-renowned historian. She's not specifically a feminist. She's a world-renowned historian. And these were her findings as well. So you cannot deny.
You would have to go and look at the actual data and the findings and look at how the studies were constructed, how they were put together, check them for biases, cross-reference them with other studies, and all that fun stuff. It's actually a lot more complicated because like I say this all the time. Everybody just cherry picks their own favorite statistics and it's like, aha, a scientist said that my opinion is right. It's like, no, this other scientist said that my opinion is right. It's like, guys, maybe your opinions are maybe both 60% right, and you should just probably get all of the data and put it together and have a more holistic point of view. But that's not what anybody does, and it's infinitely frustrating.
And the reality,
Did I say that women can't do anything else? We're not saying women can never leave the house. We're not saying you can't have other things in your life that you find fulfilling.
you're suggesting that the primary role for a woman, and that, you know, in your faith, I'm not going to discredit that, but your faith in God says that this is what you believe God says that you should be doing, but that the primary role for a woman is that she should be staying at home, that she should be devoted to her husband, she should be devoted to her children. The facts do not back that up. The facts of familial satisfaction don't back that up.
Well, hang on. Okay, let me jump in. Hang on.
Yes, they do.
Hang on. Sorry, Clementine. I think you've chosen the wrong moment to say that. You've clearly got a woman here on the panel where the facts completely back that up. She's had a lot of kids. She's very happily married. She loves
that there would be exceptions to the rule, but statistically,
and this is the problem. Every statistic has an exception to it. And so what do we do with that? Right? Like how do you, like, let's bring it home for us, for you and me, the audience at home who's watching this. What do I do? What do you do with the fact that every single statistic has an exception? How are you going to figure out if you are going to fit into the statistic, or are you going to be the exception? How are you going to use statistics to figure out how you should run your life? Like, how the frick are we supposed to know this? How are we going to figure this out? Right? And that's one of the primary things that I want to explore on this channel, because it's a really fascinating question where everybody has their own statistics that says what they want them to say, and there's always exceptions to those rules. It's like, okay, what's actually the rule? And I would say one of the things is, one of the primary issues with this is that people don't even seem to know what fulfillment is. Like at the start of this conversation that I did in my previous video, that people didn't even bother to figure out what fulfillment is. And so we don't actually even know what the heck it is we're even arguing about, in a sense. And that's really frustrating. And so, honestly, I think part of it is paying attention to ourselves and seeing what makes us happy, and understanding that happiness is actually a symptom of progress towards a meaningful goal. And so we don't actually start with happiness, we start with meaningful goals. And a lot of that will come, what your goals are will come down to your desires and your why. And that all comes from the values that you subconsciously or consciously implanted into your mind, which means we actually have to go all the way back to just figuring out, why do I think what I think? Why do I think this way? Is this a subconscious value that was hand imprinted onto me by my parents when I was 5 years old and I never thought to question it? Or do I have actually put in the work to question it, right? It's a really, really complex thing, but let's keep going.
Speaking.
Oh, you just literally got one sitting there in front of you.
That's completely untrue, though. For
Statistically
her to say
speaking,
that this
the data
one
suggests
study,
that-
that this one survey is going to tell us something. First of all, we have two
It was a
massive
multi-year. It
worldwide.
was a multi-year study.
Ma'am, if I
Let
could
me
speak.
ask you,
study
Clementine.
done.
Let me ask Clementine. When you were you married or not? I can't remember what you said. Were you married?
No, I've never been
Okay. Well, when you were with your partner before you broke up, who did the household chores and stuff like that? I mean, how did you delineate that as a feminist?
It was a struggle, because even in lots of supposedly egalitarian households, and, you know, again, the data backs up that women, even women who make more money than their partners or their spouses, tend to do more unpaid domestic labor. This is the
Who did most of the domestic chores?
In my house?
Yeah.
Me.
You did.
Me.
Okay. And
Yeah.
Rachel, who does most of them in yours?
That's the reality for.
Well, hang
most,
on.
For most
Rachel,
women,
who does?
And by the way, I want to say there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing domestic chores. I do domestic chores all the time. I keep my room clean. I do my own laundry. I wash my own freaking dishes. I had my own apartment at one point, and I was by myself. I kept that fricker clean. I did all the vacuuming, all the sweeping, all the mopping, all the cleaning. I scrubbed my tub. I was not a pig. When I moved into my own apartment and had it for a while, that place was clean. I did all the domestic chores, and I found it to be very, very fulfilling. Not degrading in the sense, as a man, here's the thing. Gender roles they come out of nature. And so when we're cavemen, of course, we're really, really limited by the lack of industry and electricity. And so it makes sense that everyone would do what they were primarily best suited for. But nowadays, it's not necessarily the case. And so gender roles, you can make an argument that they're tied to our inherent biology and nature, but for me, as a man, I do whatever the frick is required to hit to the goal. If that means I have to wash the dishes to keep my apartment clean, then I do that. If I'm married and my wife gets sick, I put her in bed, I wash the dishes, clean up, and put the kids to bed because I care about my wife, right? Like, whether or not it's traditionally a woman's job or a man's job has no bearing on my thinking at all. I do whatever is required to achieve the goal and acquire success. And so when I'm running a household and my wife has a thing and she's got to go do a thing for a church event, it's like, all right, sweet, peace, take that one kid with you, I'll take care of these kids, I'll sweep, do the wash and stuff, right? Because I'm not lazy. The house needs to be maintained and we're all doing different things. And so we just have open communication and write on the schedule who's doing what. It's like, okay, it's my turn to do the vacuuming. I'll freaking do it. I'm not a wimp. I can vacuum. It's fine. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Who does the domestic stuff in your house, Rachel?
I do absolutely all of it. And the thing I want to say to
So you're very
Clementine
similar. I mean, it seems to me you're both.
I care far less about women's fulfillment in careers than I care about children and how they're being raised. And I want her to justify to me why we should be paying low-wage daycare workers to raise our children rather than doing it ourselves. How does it make sense to take your duty of motherhood and simply put it on a different random woman? How does that system make sense? Why should we tell women to do that?
If you would like to stay at home and raise your children, that's
You're not answering
totally
my
fine.
You're not answering the question.
My question
Answer
is,
the
how is
question.
it good for
no,
children
it's a question
for
of
them
choice.
to be raised by
It's a question of choice.
No, it's not
it's
a question
actually
of
not
choice.
worse.
No.
The problem now is they've made the assumption that to do motherhood correctly, you have to be with your kids 24/7. Like, that's the underlying disagreement that they're not actually focusing on. Miss Wilson seems to be under the opinion that if you let other people take care of your kids for XYZ period of time, that makes you a bad mother. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think motherhood is more about relationships and overall care than it is, how many hours a day you spend with your kid. You want to put your kid in 5 hours of daycare, let them have a social life and hang out and do stuff, and then take care of them in the afternoon. Like, that's fine. Like, they'll grow up to be a pretty well-functioning teenager and adult, and then they can make their own decisions. And if it wasn't entirely efficient and they have a few psychological hang-ups from going to daycare and having fun with their friends, well, they can deal with that in their 20s like I am and the rest of us do, right? Obviously there's a line where it's like, okay, yeah, if you never see your kid, obviously you're not going to have a relationship with them and you won't be a very good mom. But to suggest that by default, putting your kids in daycare makes you a bad mom, I think that's kind of ridiculous. But nobody's even bothering to get down to the crux of the question, which is, how do you define good versus bad motherhood?
Not worse for children to be raised by working mothers. That's also the facts back that up. There is no study that suggests that women who work
Listen, lady,
raise children who are less happy. That is not true.
There are no facts on planet Earth that back up that single mother households have better outcomes. That's one. Two, that outsourcing your...
Hang on.
Let me finish. Lady, if you outsource the raising of your children, you're already making yourself a single mother, just so you know. Here's what's going on. Just so that you understand.
Are you a single father because your wife raises your children for you?
Lady.
Excuse me, don't call me lady.
Can you let me finish? Can anybody finish a point? Or
I don't know. Do you have a point?
Are only you allowed to? I'm trying to make one. So
you don't seem to be making a point, Andrew.
If you outsource your children's raising to strangers, answer Rachel's question and tell her how that makes more sense than having the child raised by their own biological mother. Actually answer.
Well, in my case, it makes more sense because I need to make money to pay my bills to raise my child.
But
in many other families, it makes...
What if you depended on your husband's income?
Do you see the problem of how we ended up here?
Now it's my turn to finish. But actually, again, if you knew what you were talking about, if you actually read anything about the data on these things rather than just reaching into your gut for a feeling that feels
let's
true
go
to
over
you.
the data. Show me the data that shows that if you outsource
The data
childcare,
shows
it's
us.
There was a father in the household.
shows
Let me
have
bring
that
Emily
issue.
in, because Emily's been, again, Emily's been, hang on.
There is no statistical data to support the fact that children raised by mothers who work are less happy than children raised by mothers who stay at home.
Yes, there is. There's tons
I
of
would
data.
never try and stop Rachel,
There's so
your wife,
much
from staying home to raise
overwhelming
your
data.
children. That's her choice. That's
Hey,
her choice
listen,
to do that.
there is so much overwhelming
because
data.
that's her choice.
All right, let
All
me
you do is
bring Emily
filibuster,
in.
lady.
Let me bring Emily in.
Piers knows that.
Emily was trying to say
Yes,
something.
you don't want your daughters and your nieces being forced to stay at home to raise families.
I don't want.
You
There is-
don't want
I
that.
don't want.
You
There's
them to have choice.
I don't
overwhelming
want my
evidence
kids
that
to
the
be forced to
outcome
do
for
anything.
children-
No, Emily, you wanted to say something.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, look, I'm not going to argue data with either of you guys. I'm sure you know more than me, but I can say that my father is my hero and the most important person in my life. And if I didn't have him and he wasn't in the household, I don't know where I would be today. And my girlfriends who were raised without fathers in the household, I do see them struggle in different ways when it comes to dating and all these different things. And it's funny because it's like they do make a point. Like if there was a father in the household supporting you, I think a lot of these issues wouldn't be what they are. So I think.
Yeah. And I would say that whether it's the biological father or biological mother, men and women both need strong masculine and feminine figures, stable figures in their lives to help them grow up into stable, functioning human beings. That's how I would at least put it. You at least need some form of strong, stable, consistent masculine figure, and you at least need some form of strong, stable, feminine figure to help us make ourselves a whole people. And the world is a messed up place, and life gets complicated. Sometimes that's not the way it turns out. Sometimes it's your grandfather that fills that role. Sometimes it's your grandmother that fills the role. Sometimes it's your next door neighbor that you're really, really close with, or something like that, or your kid's dad, or your friend's dad, or something, right? Like, life gets very, very complicated. And I think that what everyone can agree on would be you need a stable masculine and feminine person in your life growing up, at least one or two, right? And those who don't have that definitely seem to struggle. Well, let's keep going a little bit more.
Points to both of these things.
Okay, let me ask Andrew. Andrew.
But supporting in what way?
Is your name Andrew? Anyway, go ahead. Pierre.
Yeah, well, Andrew, I was going to ask Andrew, when Rachel said that she does all domestic chores, is there anything you do? I mean, do you put the bins out? Do you the trash out? I mean, what do you do anything?
I don't do shit. That's what I got a wife
Maybe a
for.
little yard work.
But not only that.
If something breaks, there's yard work. That's about it.
Yeah, cars need repair, something like that. But I'm not going to do household chores. That's what I got married for. I don't want to do household chores. Not only that, on top of that, let's just point a couple things out. She's absolutely wrong. Here's what the stats actually say. That if a child is raised in a two-parent household, they're going to have way better outcomes. And if they have a present mother who's more present with them, they're going to have way better outcomes. Every single data point backs this up. The outsourcing of children to public school, especially for 8 hours a day, is absurd. Stop. Let me finish the point. Let me finish the point, and then you can respond. Let me finish the point.
I've got to say, Clementine, as someone who doesn't like being interrupted, you interrupt
Why is
a
it that you
lot.
won't let me finish the point?
I got a
Let me
text
finish the
message from your
point.
producer, Piers, telling me to interrupt if I disagreed with anyone.
Yeah,
So
but
take it
can
up
you-
with
Okay,
them.
no, but I
Can
think
you
that,
at least let me
what's
finish the
what's
point?
changed since that text message is you've made a point of objecting to being interrupted. So I don't think you can do that.
And yet I keep
And
being
then keep
interrupted,
interrupting.
Piers, so that's just the state of play
Why don't
right
you
now.
practice what you
I keep
preach
being
and
interrupted.
don't interrupt Andrew when he's trying to finish his point?
Yeah, so look, I've just finished the point.
Would he make
All
a point? He hasn't made one
Yeah,
yet.
I just did. I made multiple points. All the data points
Well,
are
he's made
against
the
you
point
on
that
this.
he doesn't respect his
You're
wife
still not,
because he doesn't.
lady.
He
You still
married a
can't
wife
stop
because
talking.
he didn't want
You
to do
still
anything
can't
for
stop
himself.
talking, lady. This is why it should say the 19th under that shirt. You cannot even be quiet long enough to hear a counterpoint. Here's the counterpoints. The data you're citing, you don't have any when it comes to outcomes for children, when it comes to outsourcing their raising.
Incorrect.
None.
Incorrect.
No. Show me any that shows that you sending your kids outsourcing.
Which data are you
Would
citing?
you stop so that I can finish the question?
No, tell me.
I'm trying to at least
cite the
finish the
data.
Tell
question.
you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Here's the thing. One more time. All data points to the fact that if you outsource the
incorrect.
raising of your children,
You can't
especially
just
when they're
stand there
young,
and say all data. You actually have
Yeah.
to cite it.
cite
That's not
any
true.
data
All
that
does
shows
not say that.
cite in.
None of them are actually citing data. which is annoying because I would like to read it for myself, but I guess we'll just watch them yell at each other for another few minutes.
Outsourcing the care of your child is good for the child. Yeah, that's right.
Kuntz.
Nothing. You got Stephanie Kuntz doesn't say that. You're lying through your teeth.
Do you even know who Stephanie Kuntz is?
Yes, you mean the feminist
knows
writer?
who Stephanie Kuntz is.
The feminist writer?
You don't. You see, you clearly don't even know what you're talking about.
I don't.
I can tell you.
You're not even interested. You're not even interested enough in the topic.
I'm sorry.
You're not even interested enough to respect the topic
Stephanie
enough.
Kuntz? Let's make sure we got it right. Who's Stephanie Kuntz?
Stephanie Kuntz is an historian. A world-renowned historian into marriage and the structure of the American family.
And isn't a feminist, right? Isn't a feminist? I just want to make sure we're clear.
I have no idea if she's a feminist or not. I know that she's an historian.
Well, then why would you try to make a refutation about what I'm saying? Clearly, you don't know enough about the topic. Right? It's silly.
I have the data.
I'm only allowed to.
I have the
data for her.
Okay, so so at this point, this is when conversations just whittle down to like nothing, and it's like, you interrupted me. No, you interrupted me first. You interrupted me. No, you interrupted me. You don't have data. No, you don't have data. I have data. No, I have data. Why would you bother making that? It's like nothing is happening now. Nothing is happening. We're not learning anything anymore. And so now we're done. But this is just part 2 of me reacting to this. I have part 1 right here. You guys can check it out. What do you think about my points and my perspectives? Do you think I'm an idiot? Do you guys want me to go? What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to research both of these individuals, look at their books, use ChatGPT to get all of the data right in front of me, and then maybe we can go and read it together so that instead of watching 2 people say, you have data, no, you don't, no, you don't, no, you don't, we can actually just read it together and go through, like, I don't know, 25, 35 different studies and statistics and see if we could come up with something actually useful. Would that be fun? Let me know in the comments. Check out part 1 or part 3 right here. I'll see you guys later. Bye.